Attention campers, this is your camp director. In today's all-camp event for the Sports Merit Badge, we will be discussing BASEketball, Kingpin, Slapshot, 2008 Speed Racer, and the Waterboy. Joining me is camp counselor Dylan Randazzo. Additionally, as a reminder, those are medicine balls, not the new dodgeballs. Please stop throwing them at other campers. And as always, it's going to be a great day at Camp Film Camp. Welcome, campers. Welcome to Camp Film Camp. Today we are, as you heard, working to earn the Sports Merit Badge. And joining me today is camp counselor, other side, Dylan Randazzo.
Hello, everyone. I'm very thrilled to be your second honorary camp counselor. This show is great. This format is great. This whole channel is great. Chris was great last time, and I'm excited to hopefully fill half the shoes he did as your co-camp counselor today. I'm very excited.
You're allowed to wear both shoes on this show.
Well, I'm wearing three different teams worth of gear, so that's okay.
If you're new here, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our 5 campy sports movies, do a brief discussion on those, and then we're going to rank them. Our combined top 2 we're going to deep dive on, and then we're going to score them and find out which one wins the camp trophy. So without any further ado, let's start with our first movie, which is going to be BASEketball. So, Dylan, was this a first-time watch for you?
This was all but one of these films was a first-time watch for me. So yeah, this is
nice.
A brand new, not even a first-time watch in sense of like watching the film, but like I had heard very little about this. I had known the title, and I assumed I knew which 2 sports it was about, but I knew very little else. I didn't even know that Trey Parker and Matt Stone were involved. Like I didn't know anything. So this was pretty much a blind watch for me. Yeah.
What's your history with Trey Parker and Matt Stone? Had you watched South Park? I assume you had seen, or at least heard Book of Mormon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Book of Mormon's the big one. Obviously, that's what I most recognize them for, which is interesting because I think most people would recognize them from South Park. So I wasn't a South Park guy. I was more of a Family guy. I was more of the Fox children's cartoon, or not children's, but animated cartoon programs. For me, they were kids programs because I watched them when I was kids because I had cool parents who let me do that, but probably shouldn't have. But yeah, I didn't watch a lot of South Park, but I knew who they were. Like I knew their names. I like the South Park movie. I like Book of Mormon, as you said, and that's kind of the extent of my knowledge of them. What I really knew more about was Zucker, the director and writer, because my favorite comedy of all time is Airplane. So that was kind of the name that when I went into BASEketball, when I was looking at who was involved, I was like, oh, it's a Zucker film first and foremost. But then also realized, like, for most people, this was the guys who did South Park. Even though I believe I don't know in the timeline if this came before or after South Park had started. I don't really know how long South Park has been running because I think it's since before I was born. But I was very intrigued by just the crop of people who made this. Yeah.
Right. Well, and South Park had, I believe, just started when this movie came out. And that's actually the reason that Trey and Matt did it, is because they were they wanted to get attention to their show, basically. Because I not grew up. When I was a teenager when this came out, and it's marketed at exactly me. And so me and my best friend at the time were super into this movie. We watched it all the time. We used to quote it all the time. I even for years, even years after he and I really stopped being like friends or anything, would still do the oh thing that he does in the movie. I would just do that all the time. So this movie was basically on rotation when I was over at his house all the time. So it had a lot for me. South Park, I did watch it. I mean, I was also the demographic for that, which was the demographic which I believe Family Guy's demographic is the same, which is people who are too young to watch this.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I called them children's shows by accident, because that is exactly what it is. I think even this movie, like, it's targeted towards teens, but it is still very adult and mature in its humor
Right.
by being immature in its humor, if that makes sense, you know?
No, it does make sense.
Yeah.
So I watch this a lot. I'm a huge Book of Mormon fan. Like that's like you, that's my favorite thing that they've done. Like I'm a big fan of Book of Mormon. Yeah, I've been a fan of theirs obviously since I was a teenager. Book of Mormon was just like that it felt like that legitimate thing that they did that I liked. Like they did those things that were just for me, but they did this thing for everybody, and that's awesome. But yeah, so how did you feel after your first watch of this movie?
I was very pleasantly surprised by it. I think you had told me off air, you were like, "You're gonna hate this," and honestly, I think for a little bit of it, I was like, I understand why the notion would be I hate this, because there is a lot of dated humor. I think we'll talk about 4 out of the 5 of these films have dated humor just by nature of when they're made and just the audiences it's targeted for, and written by. But I think just because I am such a fan of Jerry Zucker from Airplane, like there was just so many great jokes that were just so silly and stupid, but it's like my kind of silly and stupid. Word plays or very like on the nose visual gags, stuff like that. That I actually really appreciated it. I don't think it lives up to like the heights of Airplane, no pun intended, because airplanes fly. But yeah, no, I think it was a very interesting film. I think honestly the combination of the two is a stupid idea, but it's one that's very well kind of just exemplified in the first 5 minutes, to where you don't have to question at all the rules of the game. It's just kind of a film that, like its game, they make it up as they go, and I think it's all the better for that. Like I kind of love the idea of these losers just trying to like think they're cooler than everyone else, and by design they make that game. And I thought the whole movie was going to be about like making the game, designing the game, getting the game going, but it does have that sharp cut 5 minutes in where it's like, oh no, this is not about that. It's about, okay, this is a fully established sport. Now it's about these two guys and kind of the overall sports industry and the environment of sports, and then it becomes a spoof film of sport movies, kind of like a lot of Zucker's other films are for other different genres. So I just thought it was a very unconventional movie based on what I thought it was going to be, based off of that like first 5 minutes. But there are elements obviously that hold it back. But I think that's the same with most of these films that we're going to talk about today. So I'm not kind of using that as my overall driving factor of disliking or liking these films. It's more so when I can separate that, how does it work then? And I think this honestly had me laughing quite a bunch. I enjoyed the performances. I enjoyed the banter and the fun and the gags. I enjoyed this one. And I did want to bring up very briefly my outfit. It was inspired not just by BASEketball, but the idea of being a fan of so many different sports at once. It is a hard life to juggle. People are going to be asking about the Celtics hat. I'm not a Celtics fan. My team retired when I was a kid. The New Jersey Nets don't exist anymore. They're the Brooklyn Nets now. So I didn't make the full leap with the team. After that, I kind of just rooted for fun basketball. So that's why I'm wearing this hat, because this was a hat I bought on my Boston field trip in 8th grade. So that's kind of the backstory there, but I am a Giants and Yankees fan, so I wanted to rep all the different sports, and I think this is fun because it does rep kind of all the different sports and just the overall language and the way we kind of absorb sports. I think the commentators are some of the best parts of this film, because they are very clearly spoofing real commentators and just kind of some of the ridiculously of that, and taking every little
thing
so
real
seriously.
Commentators.
And that's what I think makes it better too, is that you have real commentators basically playing fictionalized spoof versions of themselves, which I think works really, really well. But I love how it's a hybrid of all these different things, so it can appeal to a lot of different people and a lot of different audiences.
I could. Here's the thing. 2 things. First of all, it is David Zucker, not Jerry Zucker.
Did I say
other Zucker brother?
Oh my gosh. I even looked it up to make sure I didn't say it wrong. Yeah.
Here's the thing. To me, and I'm sure to you, they are the Zucker brothers. So
they
are. If one is doing something, it feels like they're both doing something. So
I'm so sorry. I even pulled up my phone. I hate pulling up my phone on streams, and I was like, I'm just gonna peek. Okay, Jerry, and it was like, nope, it's the other one. So yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Second, when I said that I thought you would hate it, I hadn't watched it yet, and I don't even think
you hadn't seen
it.
Or you just hadn't rewatched it. You said you grew up.
I had seen it. I had watched it many times. I hadn't rewatched it yet. Like I hadn't seen it since I was like a teenager.
Gotcha.
And so like everything I was thinking about was just memories of things. And fun fact, your memories are just your memory of the last time you remembered it. So memories can be. That's why memories are weird. But so when I said that, it was based solely on that. when and by the way, I don't think it's off air. I think it's actually on the episode of Framewreck that came out yesterday, right?
Oh, okay.
Yesterday. I
Yeah.
think it's actually on that episode that you could hear that. So if you want to hear me say that, go watch Framewreck on the Dill Pickle Movie Network.
Yeah.
When I finally sat down and watched it, a lot of it was dated, and it is dated, and the humor is dated. There's also a lot of, and I think this is just true for Trey and Matt, is that their comedy and the stuff that they do pushes the envelope. It does go outside of what we would normally consider politically correct or whatever, like that. But it is still progressive. It's progressive while jumping lines, similar to Seth MacFarlane. So like a lot of it, even though it was like, okay, we're not going to say that now, it still was trans affirming, because even though they were making jokes about it, Squeak didn't care at the end. Like, at no point did Squeak deny that person or anything like that. There's other stuff like they make gay jokes, but then they're penalized for it, and he's like, no, it's not a gay joke, it's a San Francisco joke. Stuff like that.
And the movie ends with them making out. Like, that is kind of the big queer affirming thing about this film too. Yeah.
So while there is a some stuff that does not age well, there's also, for the time, it's actually for the time pretty progressive, because no one was batting an eye. Even the most even the people who were going to be offended by it weren't really offended by it back then. I mean, I'm sure there were some, especially usually you more the conservative, like, you can't say that in front of my children type people. But so I think for its time, it was pretty aggressive, even if it has not aged very well at all. So that's good. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Did you have anything else about BASEketball before we move on?
No, I mean, my basic thought for BASEketball is that if you're looking at it as a camp sports movie, which is what we are doing, I think it exemplifies that. It is silly, it is ridiculous. You can't take it seriously, and I think that's the thing, is like understanding the film on its own terms, and that's kind of the importance of the camp premise in general, just understanding exactly what it's going for. And I think it is all intentional here, and that's why some people would say it's bad, some people would say it's great, some people say it's so bad it's good. I think it just understands that it is silly and it is camp and it delivers, and I think that's the most important thing. Like, it sets out to it fulfills exactly what it sets out to do.
I agree. Two more things I did want to mention. Number one, Robert Stack, as a true crime fan, the fact that Robert Stack was in this so much made me very happy. Number two, I loved the little joke in this movie, and I loved it back then, but I loved rediscovering it. The joke about how massive their wangs are, and that they draw attention to it, but it's like all the attention they draw to it is very subtle. Like, he sets the paper down next to their massive wangs, and then like he turns and it swings by the face. Like, that stuff was all very, very funny to me again. And I remembered that, like, I knew that was part of it. I did not know that it would make me laugh again like it used to make me laugh. So that's nice.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it did hold up for me. There's a lot that didn't work necessarily, but overall it definitely did hold up for me. So let us move on to our next movie, which is Kingpin.
Ooh.
Now, was this the one you had seen before?
Nope, this is still not the one.
Oh, you had not. Oh, okay.
No,
sorry.
First watch for me as well. Yeah, no, I love all these first watches. That's part of the fun of this specific episode. Was I was kind of like reaching back into your nostalgia to find like a lot of new favorites of mine, or maybe favorites, not just typical.
Maybe we'll see. Okay. Well, how did you feel on first watch?
Yeah, I like this one as well. I think the issues it has are the issues a lot of these films have. There's some dated humor, but I think, honestly, what I love about this film specifically is that it doesn't really hit all the tropes. It focuses more on a relationship and kind of this road trip between friends, one who's kind of living more dangerously, one who's very sheltered, and kind of seeing how they kind of use each other to bring one out of a shell and humanize the other. And I like that kind of opposites attract mentality that I think the Farrelly brothers, I'm getting that right? I got them right.
Yeah,
The Farrelly brothers got right here, which, I mean, love it or hate it, is something that their Best Picture winning film was all about as well. Just opposites attracting through this road trip. Obviously, I think when you put a sillier, kind of stupid, silly, corny sports story over it, it's a little bit more palatable when it works than another film that might be reaching a little bit too far, but we're not here to talk about that one. But I do think, yeah, this was successful in being a really good buddy comedy. And I do think as a sports movie, it also doesn't necessarily hit all the conventions. You know, the bad guy wins at the end, and that's something you don't normally see, which I actually really appreciate about this film. So I again, it's not totally void of all the problems that a lot of these films have of the times, but again, if you're able to separate that and judge the film on its own terms, I think it really works pretty successfully, especially because there's not a lot of bowling movies. And you know what, if you got to say one movie is the definitive one, I think this is definitely a contender.
Yeah, I mean, Big Lebowski is the definitive one, but
but even then, like, I wouldn't say that is a bowling movie first and foremost.
True.
Whereas this one is still a bowling movie first and foremost, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it's a conventional sports movie either.
Yeah.
But I do agree, Big Lebowski is the best movie about bowling in some facet for sure. Yeah,
right. No, I'm just joking anyway. But yeah, it Farrelly brothers, Oscar winner. Peter Farrelly did make this is actually something that I realized while I was watching it, is that like they have another movie. My favorite of their movies is Dumb and Dumber, which is actually which is also a buddy road trip movie. And then they made Green Book, which is a buddy road trip movie. That I didn't realize it until just now, because I realized there was a similarity between those two. But then you mentioned Green Book, and I was like, oh yeah. That is also a buddy road trip movie. I mean, they make movies that aren't buddy road trip movies, but it seems like that is their bread and butter. That's where they do. That's what they do best. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't see it, but their newest movie, The Greatest Beer Run Ever, I think it's called. Like, I mean, I just assume by the title that it is also some sort of maybe not a trip, but some sort of buddy movie. I mean, it's about a beer run. Like, again, I think that's their pocket, and they really
friends and
they sit in the pocket well. Yeah.
But yeah, so this is one that I also watched a lot when I was younger. I mean, Farrelly brothers, their heyday was during my childhood and teen years. So this was these were movies that I watched all the time, and I did watch this all the time. There's some stuff that's always stuck with me that was, I think, funnier when I was younger, like all the stuff on the farm, the milking the bull thing was funnier back then. It's still funny, but it was funnier back then. Shoeing the horse. But my favorite thing about that is the callback gag when they walk by Buttercup later, and Buttercup is just so much shorter than he was before. That makes me laugh. But my mom, she wasn't like into Amish culture, but she did watch a lot of stuff about Amish people. And I remember she told me about Rumspringa, which is a time when Amish people, before they like solidify their commitment to the life, get to go out and experience the real world, and then come back. That's not what this is necessarily, because he was already an adult and was in the thing, but that is basically what's happening with his story. And I like that too. It reminds me of, my mom was a big Farrelly Brothers fan. Dumb and Dumber is one of her favorite movies. So in several ways this reminds me of my late mother, but that was one thing that did that for me. But yeah, this one is similar to BASEketball in that it still holds up as a movie that I enjoy watching. It actually does not work as well for me on rewatch as BASEketball did. But I still enjoyed it. Like, there was still a lot that I really like in it. And it's probably because this one stayed more in the culture after, like, as I was growing up. Like, anytime I would go to a bowling alley, there was somebody who had Ernie McCracken as their bowling name up on the screen or something like that. Like, so this one stayed, I think, a little bit more in the culture for me. So it was more fresh in mind. But when I rewatched it, it didn't work quite as well for me as it did when I was younger. But I did still enjoy it.
Yeah, I also think, just in terms of looking at the sports movie directly, like, bowling is a very tough sport because it's you're individual and you really do the same action over and over and over again. There's very little suspense. in something like this compared to something like football or basketball or baseball,
Right.
where it feels like there are little minor things that make every game unique in and of itself. But I feel like for bowling, there's almost so much you can do with just rolling a ball down a slope, hitting pins, and I think that's why I like that this kind of didn't necessarily focus so much on the sports of it all. They make it very clear that this guy's good at what he does, but then he turns out not to be great, but then he's good again, and then they kind of leave it at that. It's not, the movie is not just about him becoming a better bowler, and that's what I think the cheaper, worser version of this probably would just be like an hour of him trying to make Randy Quaid's character the best bowler, and then like the last half hour is like everything that happens in the meat of this film, but it's not. It's the half hour of that, and then the hour of everything else, which I appreciate. And Bill Murray, great bowling villain, because there are people at every bowling alley who are like that, where they're every shot, every strike, it's just they have that air of confidence and pompousness that you just hate, and he plays that perfectly.
He's really great, and he plays that role really, really well. I agree. One thing that similarity between this and BASEketball is that they don't focus too heavily on the sports themselves. That once we get the idea of what's going on, I mean, you see the action happening, but it's not so much about that. But they do both have the distraction element, because once they bring on once they bring her on, then her job is to do basically what they're doing in BASEketball, which is that
really whole fun montage, where they're trying to distract, and then like the one guy can't get her, she doesn't get his attention, so like bring in the sheep or whatever, like that whole sequence. I was like, this is BASEketball, which I like, because it shows that like sports movies, to be successful, you can recycle tropes. It's just about how you use them, and I think that's a really good trope of just like distracting an athlete. It's the hey bada swing of it all, so I think there's a reason we see some carryover tropes, because they are successful ones, and it's why genres like this, like campy sports movies, like slasher films, they exist for so long, because there's almost so much you can do, but if you just do the same things just a little bit differently, it works.
Right. Absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to our next movie, which is Slapshot. This was a first watch for you as well?
Yes, it was.
This one was not a first watch for me, but it was a second watch. I had watched it once when I worked at the video store way back in the day. So I had actually, it wasn't one I watched all the time. It was one that I knew kind of what happened, but I was able to kind of reappreciate it again. One thing that really strikes me about this movie is that it is written by a woman. And so that, while it doesn't excuse some of the stuff in it, it does make me go, okay, well, I mean, women can be sexist, but it does feel like they're like almost not really like it's getting a pass, but just like it recontextualizes some of the stuff in this movie to make it a little bit more palatable.
Yeah. Wow.
So this one has a lot that doesn't work, but I think a lot of the stuff that wouldn't work today, that hasn't aged well. But I do think a lot of the stuff that doesn't age well is used appropriately as a negative, rather, or not as like an appropriate insult, but like as they are. The reason that it works is because it's wrong. Like, so it's but what did you think about this on your first watch?
No, that's very interesting that you said that, because I think like nowadays everyone's like, oh, you got to separate the art and the artist. You got to separate the art and the artist. But I do think, having known that, knowledge that it is a woman director, maybe I would have been able to appreciate this a lot more, because I was consistently just irritated and just frustrated with a lot of the humor in this thing, and how poorly it has been received, or has been held up. But I do think, knowing it is a woman, it could be like this kind of overall kind of thesis on male culture of a specific age and specific, lifestyle. I think the most fascinating character is the wife that is being cheated on and being kind of run through the mud. And like, I honestly would have loved to see the movie that is more focal from her perspective, because it is still trying to be Paul Newman's story. And I think he's doing a lot of the badness. I think he starts in a good place, and it's one of those rare character arcs where he gets progressively more problematic and more unlikable as it goes on, versus where most stories take it from like someone who's unlikable and they make him more of a darling by the end, which is a cool kind of twist on its tropes. But I do think, now knowing that a woman, I don't know if a woman wrote this, you said, or directed it?
A woman wrote it. Yeah.
Wrote it. Okay. So, either way, written or directed, I do think that adds a little bit more context as to it might be an indictment, it might be a criticism, it might be a social commentary more so than it is an advocation for it. But I do think just based on a first watch, this was the last thing I did watch. So I was also coming off the high of watching movies for the first time that I hadn't seen, like BASEketball and Kingpin. And this was the one where I was like, ooh, like I really don't think this has aged particularly well. And I also think part of it is hockey is just a sport I've tried so hard to get into. My ex-girlfriend's dad worked for the NHL, and I, had a two parent or not, yeah, my dad and my uncle both worked, at the Meadowlands and worked at all these like places where MSG, these places where hockey is very prevalent. New Jersey's a big hockey state. I just could not get into the sport. And I think that's partially why I can't always get into hockey films. I watched Mighty Ducks recently, didn't get into that either. Like, I think it's just one of those things where I'm just at an arm's length distance from the sport. And I think a lot of the appeal to some people is the fighting and the beating each other up in the ring, which is like my least favorite part of hockey. And that's what this film seems to focus on more. It's like not even about hockey as much as it is about boxing on ice, And I think that's kind of why I was kind of just struggling to tap into it from the start. Now, I think a lot of people are going to say it's dated because of it's old. And I don't think that's the case because there's some old sports movies that I do love. This comes out the same year or year before or after Rocky. So like it's not the era that's the problem. It's more so I think just the subject matter and some of the humor and not knowing that it was written by a woman to kind of not give me that little bit of perspective that made me kind of struggle to get into it and enjoy it. And it is the longest one of all these films. And I think it does kind of feel that way because most sports films are an hour and a half, or at least sports comedies, or at least, campy sports films to where when you have that 2 hour runtime, it just feels like it's biting off a little bit more than it should be chewing. But I mean, that's just me. There was meant to be a clunker or two when you're dealing with camp films because it doesn't always work for everyone. But I wish I loved this one as much as so many other people do because I know it is a nostalgic favorite of some.
Right. Well, that's very interesting because I am a hockey fan. Like that. That's a sport I really like watching. And this is so funny because my team is the Devils.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, absolutely. And if I had a team, it would probably be the Devils or Rangers. Like the tough thing about
Rangers eat nuts.
I was gonna say the tough thing about being kind of on that borderline is like it's tough because you got both teams kind of you're sandwiched between. But yeah, no, I wish I liked this more, but maybe it is just if I had a big love for hockey, I'd be like, oh yeah, hockey movie. This is the hockey because for a while until like Miracle and Mighty Ducks came out, this was probably like the hockey movie. I'd guess, yeah.
Which and to be fair, you're right. It's more of a like boxing on ice movie than a hockey movie. So the hockey element isn't really a big part of it. It's more about the characters, which is the thing that I really like about it. The Hanson brothers are really funny. And I really dig them. They are basically where the camp comes from in this movie. Is the Hanson brothers? They are the camp element for the most part. Paul Newman is just a great actor, and he was great in this. I really like the guy who just wants to play the old time hockey and is upset that they're going with the flashiness. Like I like all that stories and all that's going on throughout it. Yeah. Even with a woman writer, it does there's a lot that does feel dated in it and that doesn't necessarily hold up. I did enjoy it quite a bit more than you, it seems, but I completely understand. Like I get what you're saying for sure.
And I do think the problems with the dated humor is not always generally related to male female like feminist or anti-feminist stuff. It's more so the homophobia for me that was a little too much. Like just all the weird like offhanded comments about that. Like just when they're lying in bed and she's like, "You ever thought about like sleeping with a man?" He kind of like gets like this very uncomfortable. Like it's stuff like that where it's just like kind of this attitude at the time. But again, it's of the time, so I can't like all these movies we talked about. You can't really necessarily say like, this is a bad movie because that's at the time what the humor was. I mean, look at all the Mel Brooks movies. There's a lot of similar stuff. It's just about how you craft around that,
Well, what's interesting is that I agree. Like there's a bit too much of the slurs with the homophobia. However, I do think that there is an underlying message within it, or it's not even subtext. It's within the text of like, when he says the F slur, when he's like, what are you, a F slur, and then
Mhm.
he's like, "It's fine, love who you love, no one
Right.
cares."
True. There
and
are
so
moments like that too. Yeah. Yeah.
it kind of does both things. Even in bed when she's like, "Have you ever been with a man or thought about being with a man?" He gets all offended, and then he's like, "Well, I don't know, like maybe."
Right.
Like
Right.
so,
Yeah, it's almost like it wants to have its cake and eat it too, which for half of
right,
that is great, but it's also, and again, it's the time, so I'm not going to be too much of a harp on it. I
right,
honestly just
right,
was
yeah.
a little bit less just entertained, I think, which is really what it
Oh,
comes down
okay.
to because all these movies are so excessive in their camp. I feel like and I think you might have said it best with just like you're a hockey fan, and that could also just be part of it. You like the Hanson brothers. I'm not the biggest fan. You also love Paul Newman. I do too, but part of my reason why I was like, is because he said that this is his best movie he's ever done. And to me, I'm like, what about The Sting? What about The Verdict? What about Road to Perdition? Like all these things where I'm just kind of like, oh, it's not the worst thing he's done because he was in Cars. But I do think, it's one of those things where when you hear an actor say that, it's almost like you're ignoring all this. It's like when Rachel Zegler is like, oh my God, like Disney opened the door for me to have a career with Snow White. I'm like, Steven Spielberg is right there. What are you doing? So it's like one of those things where I'm just like, it's hearing him hype it up. I'm like, really, bro? But I get it. It's a fun movie, and he probably had a fun time on set because it is all these guys just like hanging out, drinking, having fun, being dudes. So like, I get why it was
Right.
probably a fun film to make, at least. Yeah.
To be fair to Rachel Zegler, like she did West Side Story, and then like was only offered like Juliet roles. So
True. True.
so I could
True.
see why she would say
But
that.
Steven
But
Spielberg opened that door for her. It was not Disney. But
that's true.
Disney's going to get her the
That's true.
biggest paycheck. So there you go. Love you, Rachel,
That's
if you're
true.
listening. Thank you. And I know she listens. So, yeah.
Of course she does.
Oh, of course. Number
So
one.
yeah, so yeah, no, I certainly hear what you're saying on that, and I could see even why Paul Newman would feel that way. I mean, it's a less serious movie for him, and maybe he's thinking about the fun of the movie rather than, I don't know. It's hard to say, but
Yeah.
I enjoy this movie. I like it quite a bit. Yeah. So, but yeah, we can move on to the next film in our slate, which is, and I'm so excited to talk about this movie, guy. Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this movie. It's Speed Racer. Let me real quick before we get into this. I, I saw this movie in theater. My cousin
Lucky.
was visiting, and he's an anime fan, and I had seen Speed Racer the series a few times, but not, I wasn't like a watcher of that series. So it wasn't, none of this was like, I need to see that because I love Speed Racer. It's just like the Wachowskis, Emil Hirsch. I love Emil Hirsch. John Goodman. If you saw the draft day episode for my birthday, you know that John Goodman is one of my favorite actors. So John Goodman was in it. Christina Ricci was one of my first crushes in life. Like I was just in love with her when I was a kid. So there were so many elements of this movie that was like, I have to see this. And my cousin came and visited, and I was like, do you want to go watch it? He's like, yeah, let's go watch it. And then we'll vomit multicolored or we'll throw up multicolor vomit. And I was like, let's do it because of the flashy colors. And we went and saw it. And we both were just like blown away. Like we loved this movie. And then we left, and suddenly it seemed like everyone else but us hated this movie, and we didn't really understand. I've maintained a love for this movie. I absolutely love this movie so much. But Dylan, this is your first time, and I'm desperate to find out how you feel about this movie.
Okay. It's hard with the Wachowskis because I hate using the word masterpiece very willingly because, in my opinion, everyone gets their masterpiece. Very rarely will directors get like more than one. And I get it. Like a lot of people will say that about Spielberg or Lucas or whatever. But I just think I love Bound and The Matrix so much, but I hesitate calling this anything other than a masterpiece because it is, I think, I think it's a phenomenal film. And I think it's also because not just looking at it in the context of the other works, because I think that's where I was like, is it there? It's not their masterpiece because that's Bound for me, but it's also The Matrix for 99% of the people. But I think you can have multiple masterpieces, and I think for a decade and for a style and for a place and time, this is a masterpiece because I think there's more movies influenced by Speed Racer than there are The Matrix. I really do. I think right now we look at a lot of modern editing styles, a lot of color choices. We look at all of Edgar Wright's work. Not all of it because some of it came out before this, but I think like Scott Pilgrim, torn from the same exact chapter book of this. Like I think there's so many movies. Spider-Verse you don't get Spider-Verse without Speed Racer. And I think that's the problem, is because it didn't have the box office success and it didn't have that big, it came out between like Iron Man and The Dark Knight. It was never going to break out. Wall-E came out 2 weeks before it. Like, there's just no, I don't know if that's actually factually correct, but it came out in the summer of 2008, which was chock full of the first MCU movie, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight, Wall-E, Kung Fu Panda, Mamma Mia, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, which was not well acclaimed, but was still a big movie. This just got totally buried. And I think people look at its legacy as this big bomb, but I think they need to look at it as an art form and what it did for cinema. And I do think a lot of people, now that they rewatch it, they still don't get on that hype train, because it is a film that if you watch on a laptop, which I will say right now, I did, because that was the only way in time and place I could. But like, if you watch this and you have one little ounce of rendering issue with your stream or your Wi-Fi, it can throw the whole thing off. You need to watch this in the crispest, clearest HD. And that's why I envy you, Matt, because you saw this in a theater. And I think this is just one of those things that when you have the peak performance quality of the visuals, it's unlike anything you'll see. And I think there's something to be said about movies that, use fake aesthetics and like feel out of place because they're fake aesthetics, versus some that just embrace it. Like, it's embracing the fact that it's green screen, that it's popping in colors. But I think it's because it wants to be this anime movie live action, seen through live action. And I think that's the thing, is you have to look at it again on its own terms. And I think what the Wachowskis were trying to bring to this was kind of recapturing the nostalgic flair of the cartoon, while also being an homage to the anime, while also being a fun sports movie, while also just like dazzling you with the visuals. And I think that's exactly what it does and why it's so good. And I haven't even talked about the story yet. So like, I think that's just the thing, is it's just one of those, I think, landmark films that hopefully 20 years from now we're looking at as the thing that like kind of pivoted this way of visual storytelling. I don't think it will be, but I hope it is.
I love that. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to hear that, because of how much I love this movie. Yeah, I completely agree. That was you actually mentioned a bunch of the talking points that I was going to have on that, which is like, no, perfect. I'm glad that you brought them up. Things like, this is probably the best live action adaptation as far as going from one medium to the other, because of how seamlessly it feels like it moves. Like, a lot of the problem is the magic that you lose when you go from animation. Is it feels like it kept the magic and then made a movie around the magic. Like, that's kind of the way it felt. And that's I don't know. It feels so seamless. It feels like, because it feels like a living cartoon. I mean, there is a lot of it that is technically cartoon. I mean, most of the stuff that isn't people is animated, but or at least touched up in some way. Like, it's not completely real. But yeah, I absolutely love the aesthetics of this. As I said before, I love the cast of this. I have a feeling we're going to do a deep dive on this here in a few minutes. So we can move on to the next one and then come back to this, unless somehow this does not end up in our.
I mean, we haven't talked about Sandler's masterpiece coming up. Yeah, like I said, I don't loosely throw that term around, but we still have one more movie to talk about, Matthew. But yeah,
absolutely,
we'll save it for later.
Yeah, let's move on to the next movie. All right, so our next movie is The Waterboy, from Adam Sandler and his friends. This is the one you had seen. I can take from the.
You've narrowed it down. Yes, I have seen this one. This is a second watch for me.
This is a second watch for you.
Kind of. I'll explain it.
So this one is similar to the other two, or the other three. Is right three. No, two. The other two, because this is the third one that's like this, in that they came out around the same time. And so they came out when I was a lad, a high schooler, basically. And I was actually the water boy on my school's football team when this came out, which kind of sucked, because then I kept getting called the water boy.
Oh, man.
But yeah, it was. So when this came out, this was another one that my friends really dug, so I watched it a lot. This was never one of my favorite Adam Sandler movies, but there are a lot of things in it that I do love. I love that Fairuza Balk is the love interest, because I love Fairuza Balk a lot. there's a lot of quotes that I always took with it. There's a lot of things that I hate from it. Like I said, they kept calling me the Waterboy. I hate that this movie taught everyone what a medulla oblongata is. So now everyone, basically to today, if they talk about the brain, they call it the medulla oblongata, which is not what it is. It's part of the brain, not the whole brain. But everybody calls it that. And not everybody, but a lot of people, especially if they came up around my time. So there's a lot of bad things that happened as a result of this movie. But there's, I did enjoy it back in the day. I enjoyed it on rewatch. How I would like to know your situation with this.
Yeah. So the reason I said I've watched it twice, kind of, is because I always try to go back to it, and I always get like a scene or two in, and I always want to give it that fair shake, because the first time I watched this, I really didn't like it. I was like, this is very bad. But I was like, you know what? Maybe I was just a kid, didn't understand the humor. And every few years, I come back to it, watch a scene or two. I'm like, yeah, nope, not today. And I finally had to. Like, I'm glad you did this, so I could finally actually watch it all the way through again. I think you're being very kind, Matt. I think you're being very generous. I think
wow.
I am convinced this might be one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And I'm not trying to be, I know it's a nostalgic thing for people. I know there are people who are going to watch this who love Adam Sandler. I love Adam Sandler. And there are other characters that still talk funny like Adam Sandler that I love. Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore. I don't know what it is about the Waterboy, but every single time he opens his mouth, I want to mute it, and I'm not going to, for artistic integrity. But like, it's one of those things where I can't get into it. I don't understand it. I get what it's going for. I get the whole like, sidelines bench warmer to star on football team. But I feel like there's a lot of other movies that do that as well. We talked about like tropes, and that's one of the tropes. It's like the guy who's the caddy becomes the golfer, or the guy who's wiping the sweat off the basketball court ends up taking the final shot. It's like Little Giants. The kid who, like the stats kid, ends up being the one who scores the final touchdown. Like, that's a normal thing. I just, for some reason, can't get into it. I think it's because of the character. I think it's one of those things where, it's funny in an SNL sketch that's 4 minutes long. It's not when it's an hour long, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I think that's why Adam Sandler is so polarizing, because he has this thing he does really well, but it's a matter of how long and how it's used that I think people kind of, it's where you get the divisiveness. And I think this is one where I don't think it's used well, and I don't think it's done in a way that's, entertaining to me for an hour and a half. And it sucks, because I really, every time I rewatch this, I really want to like it. I like Henry Winkler. I don't love his love interest very much in this, but I think it's just because by the point we get really invested in that, I'm just already checked out. I always try to give it a fair shake, though, because I know nothing's ever going to be as bad as That's My Boy, which is my least favorite film of all time, which is also an Adam Sandler film. But it is kind of one of those movies that I try so hard, but I can never make it through. And this time I made it through it. And I'm not going to blame you, because I love the show and I love this slate, but you did this to me, Matt. You made me sit through it. No, but I love you. And I love that I got the chance to finally watch it again, so I can have like an actual opinion that's not my 12-year-old, 13-year-old brain saying this movie sucks. But now I can be an adult and say this movie sucks, but I'm not taking away from people who love it, and no. It's just not one that works for me. Yeah.
Chad, Brian, please don't turn this off now.
Yeah, no dislikes you can dislike anything on my channel for my opinion. Don't dislike Matt's, because Matt likes his movie. And I know a lot of people do, and that's the thing, is like this is kind of talked about as one of his best when people just bring up, it's like Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, The Waterboy. I don't think it's in leagues with those other films, and we've talked about other films, like even on Framework, we've talked about some of his films like Click, and that's one that I love that you don't. So I think it's just one of those things. He's very polarizing, and it depends on like what exactly works and doesn't work for his comedy for you, because it is such a bold swing, which I appreciate, and I can give that credit. It's a bold swing regardless. Like to commit to that voice and that bit the entire way through, it's a bold swing, and I won't take that away from him. Yeah.
Right. No, yeah, that's completely valid. For me, there's a lot of characters I love in it, and I think that's what holds it up. Yeah. His mama, Kathy Bates, I love her, and so Henry Winkler, I love him. What?
I can't stand Kathy Bates in this, but again, it's not her. It's just I don't like the character. It's just so.
The character is off-putting for sure. There's a funny thing that happens. My mom was nothing like this, but there is a funny bit in it that does remind me of my mom, and that is that my mom has always had a running thing where she assumed that Dick Clark must have had a deal with the devil, because he's basically always looked young. He's dead now, so he doesn't look young anymore, but he always looked young. And so the part where he's like, "Look who's on TV, Mama, it's the devil." and it's Dick Clark. That always reminds me of my mom, and it makes me laugh. But I also knew people growing up because I grew up in Oklahoma, so I knew people growing up who had similar, just basically everything secular, not of the Lord was the devil. So there was a lot of that. So I guess I understand that a bit.
Yeah.
Farmer Fran always makes me laugh because you can't understand him. And I don't know. There's a lot of characters in it that make me laugh and that I enjoy. But as far as overall quality, I agree with you. It's not a good movie. So
well, and I meant to ask you, just being from the South, like, do you think, because from an outsider's perspective, this seems like it's doing a very poor portrayal and a very offensive portrayal of the South. But again, like, I don't know if that's just something that you guys kind of take on with stride, like, it's, you're in on the joke, or if it is offensive. Because, like, obviously I take no offense to it because I'm not from there. But, like, I wonder just your perspective on that, like how it treats, because, in terms of mental illness too, I think it does a bad job portraying authentic mental illness, which it's not supposed to be authentic all the way through. But for me also, the way it portrayed the South was just not tasteful in my opinion. But
as far as like mental illness or whatever, like obviously I think that Bobby Boucher joins a host of characters from antiquity, from the beginning of movies that are autistic. We just didn't know it. We didn't know what that was, and we didn't know how to treat that. Like treat that as, because it just seemed like they were off or whatever, and we didn't. And as a society, didn't understand how to treat it. Bobby Boucher is almost certainly autistic, and that's kind of the thing. So because we didn't really understand it as a society until well after this, that's whatever. As far as from the South, I'm from Oklahoma. Where no one really claims us. Depends on what map you're looking at. Well, we're either South, Midwest, or Southwest.
Okay.
So really, we're just part of the Great Plains. But so as far as how it depicts people in the South, I've never considered myself part of the South. But even if I was, that part of the South is just so much different than my area, than Oklahoma, that it's hard for me to do that. I will say that people from Oklahoma are often the butt of jokes in movies and shows as far as intelligence and stuff like that goes. And there's some stats to prove that that's fine, but we're not all like some of the people who live here. So it's hard to. I'm not offended when I watch that. I think that also. I think that the accent, the Louisiana accent, the Bayou, the Creole accent. I don't know how to say it. I'm going to cut this out.
Yeah, you're good.
Because I don't think that it's seen as dumb, but I think that it can be hard to judge a person from that accent because it is so strong that it's like a character in a movie set in New York. If they've got that strong Brooklyn accent, you have an idea about them.
Right.
Well, doesn't necessarily paint who they are.
And then if it's slightly off, it comes across like you're mocking rather than just like being this character. And I think that's the thing when I said like I can't stand listening to him speak. It's not that I couldn't stand an autistic person or a person who spoke like that speaking. It's the fact that I think the way he's performing it comes across a little bit more mawkish and a little bit like he's mocking someone than someone who, if they had gotten someone with autism to play that role, I think it would have been very interesting. We've seen films now where people with special needs, have been in starring roles. Like Peanut Butter Falcon is an example of a character who like has Down syndrome and is the lead of that film and commands that film really well. A Different Man that just came out recently, has a character with severe physical deformities. Like I like that there are authentic castings, and I'm not saying every casting has to be authentic, but when you are portraying someone who does have special needs or something, I think there's a way to do it tastefully, and I just don't know if he does. But I know he's well intentioned too. Like I don't think he's trying to set out and say like I'm gonna make fun and mock this type of person. But I do think it is hard when you hear it for 90 minutes straight. It becomes a little grating, and you start to wonder, what is the clear intention here? What are you trying to say by your performance here? But I understand it's nostalgic too. So I know I'm in the minority of it, but I do think this one didn't hold up for me.
And even though I like it more than you, and I think that a lot of it is the nostalgia, it's not like you're far off. Like I don't think it's a great movie. I think even, here's the thing. even my favorite Sandler movies, and I don't mean movies that Sandler is in. I mean movies that are of like the Happy
Sandler
Madison movies,
breed,
like
yeah, not your Uncut Gems or Punch Drunk Loves, yeah.
right. I think there's an element of bad to all of those, even if we love them, which is great, which is fine, and they have an absolute place in cinema. Happy Gilmore is my favorite Adam Sandler movie. I'm not going to say that is peak cinema or anything like that, or even a great film. It's great to me, and I will always love it. But it's similar with this. Like, it's not great. It's not even a good movie, I don't think. There's a lot that I love about it, and a lot of that has to do with nostalgia. But any person like you who says, I don't like this movie, I'm like, you know what? I completely get it.
Yeah.
So,
and the thing is, what you were saying, like, they're not great movies. They're camp. That's what it is, and that's what our your show is, and that's what our discussion's based on. It's camp. It's just, when is it camp, and then when does it start to teeter into actually genuinely bad? But that's the thing, is nothing's objective, and that's what's beautiful about cinema in general. So I think that's like a good place to end it, is just to say, like, you're right in your opinion, but I hate it.
All right. Well, that brings us to our rankings, because that was all 5 movies. I'm very interested in how this is going to go, because I had an idea, and now I have no idea where this goes. I know what number 1's going to be, because I feel like we're
my 1 and 5.
What's your 5?
I wonder. No, it's the Waterboy.
It's the Waterboy for me as well.
Okay.
So that is our number 5. What is your number 4?
Slapshot is my number 4.
Wow. Okay. My number 4 is Kingpin.
Okay.
Your number 3?
My number 3 is BASEketball.
Okay. My number 3 is also BASEketball.
This is going to get interesting, and I know exactly why.
And so that means your number 2 is
Kingpin.
And my number 2 is Slapshot.
Yeah, and you know exactly why this is interesting, because our number 1 is Speed Racer, of course.
Our number 1 is Speed Racer. Okay. So Kingpin, BASEketball, and Slapshot are all tied for third.
My only thinking is, you dislike Kingpin, and I dislike Slapshot both more than we dislike BASEketball. So we might want to resort to our 3 as like the solid like middle ground, like, but I don't know, because you love Slapshot more than BASEketball, and I love Kingpin more than BASEketball. So it's also the reverse end of it.
I would rather. Here's the thing. I would rather watch BASEketball than Slapshot. So even though I think Slapshot is a better movie, I would rather watch BASEketball.
And I'll be honest,
I agree.
My 2 and 3 are more interchangeable than any other position on the list. Like, my 1, 4, and 5 are very solid. So there is a world where I put BASEketball over Kingpin. So I would also, I would be fine if BASEketball is like our second.
All right. Then let's do that. BASEketball and Speed Racer are
the movie you thought I would hate.
Yeah,
I love it.
There we go. Okay, let's start with BASEketball here. Deep dive. Oh, okay. So we talked about. Let's talk about the camp in this movie here. So there's a lot of it, and a lot of it is because the Zucker. Just basically the Zucker name is built on camp, like the spoof kind of camp, like everything is just over the top, taking something mundane and make it just over the top, and that's really where this movie thrives. Are there some camp elements that you particularly enjoy from this film?
Yeah, I mean, especially looking at the sports, I just love the way it's designed, because it is kind of tacky, you know, the whole like baseball diamond with the basketball hoop, and just all the little gags of like trying to distract. Like, that's where the camp comes from me, because it's like all these little bits and little jokes kind of piling into one, which I really like. It's not just like an overall camp aesthetic, but there are specific moments where it's like, that was cheesy, that was stupid, that was dumb, but that's what adds to the charm. And I think that's exactly what camp is. You know, you define it every episode, because, you know, it's important to understand, you know, what is the difference between something that's campy, which is intentional, versus something that's more on like, you know, our framework show of like, unintentional badness. And I think that's where, like, I think this gets a lot of points in that camp factor, because it understands exactly how ridiculous it is, but it isn't ashamed of that, and it's not trying to be more than that. And I really like that about BASEketball. I think it understands exactly what its humor is, and it's all those little bits that I really like, even from the very start, with like just every single person they encounter. Like, I forget what do they say, the C word. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but they say, like, can I curse?
You can curse.
Yeah, they're like cock, just under their breath, like just little ticks and mannerisms like that, which are kind of stupid and silly, but like, I don't know, I'm kind of charmed by them. It's weird, you know. It's one of those things where yeah, just like the little things I think are add to the camp. It's not this big broad thing. The concept is big and broad. It's like this big kind of hybrid Frankenstein's monster of a sport. That the concept is big, but the little moments, the character beats, the humor, it all lies in those quick little quips and digs, which is what Airplane does as well. It's this giant disaster movie, but the humor is in the little moments, and I think that's true with this.
I agree. I think that the manner in which it just goes over the top is executed really, really well. Like it, and it's not, and the characters, like Squeak is one of my favorite characters. Like he's just he's just an exaggeration of that friend that I don't say we all have, but a lot of people have him like that.
Or that we are.
Or that we are. You know, that person in the friend group. And I really, really dig that about him. And that he is not afraid. Like, he is a timid character. Like, he has low self-esteem, but he's not afraid to kind of stand up for himself, even if it scares him to do so, which I really love about Squeak. But yeah. No, I agree. Like there's so much of it that especially with that Zucker charm on it, that really works in this film. We didn't mention it before, but I love the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in a case. The only reason that's there is because it's a Zucker movie. Because he was in Airplane.
Yes, he was in Airplane. I didn't even make that connection. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's how I there's not certain, you know, things that I can point to that are absolutely, but just the overall Zuckerness of it is really what works for me.
Well, and one last thing also, the ragdoll kind of talking with that character, you know, just the idea that he kind of essentially not dies, but it comes close to it every single time. And you know, those moments where characters should be dead, but it's like that false kind of like, oh, it's a movie, so like they can't, but it works so much better in animated. But then when you do it in live action, it's like, oh wait, like they should not be able to survive that. Like the hot tub where he gets kind of like flushed in, and then like when the lever pulls and he gets like launched into the air, like all those little moments that really compile into something bigger and broader, that make it seem like it still exists outside of our world while still having this familiar look to it, because it is, you know, in our everyday life. Like it's filmed like a movie of the time, but you know, these moments happen that it's like it kind of reaches that kind of supernatural or fantastical, you know, guys, which I really like. I think that's a really cool kind of, you know, breach of the formula and the conventions of just like a regular sports movie. It's what kind of puts it above and beyond, and probably why some people say it's ridiculous and stupid, but I think it's why it works for the camp. Yeah.
Oh, I completely agree. I think you're spot on with that. What is your rating for camp? If you're holding up that scorecard.
Out of 10 or out of 5? I forget.
Out of 10.
Out of 10. I would say this is squarely like an 8.5.
8.5?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. That's actually, I'm looking at it now. That's what I had as well.
Okay.
So an 8.
Yeah, I actually stole your document. So I am Nicolas Cage.
I was looking at the wrong one. I was like, oh, okay. And then I looked. And I'm like, yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the writing of this particular movie. For me, it's not. The writing is not its strongest. I think the atmosphere is its strongest asset on that. Like we said, the campy atmosphere. I think the writing obviously leads to the camp, but as far as if we're talking just as a, like, structurally and with the dialogue, to me, it's not its strongest asset. But how do you feel about the writing in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going hand in hand with the camp. I think the best moments do tend to lean more visually than they do written. Like on paper, they're good jokes, but it's really about how you visualize it. And that was kind of, I think, the same with Airplane as well. The idea where like you can cut away and like something's happening in the frame that you just didn't expect to happen, and you're just laughing hysterically. Like I think that's like kind of again with the distraction bits where they're trying to distract people as they shoot. I think a lot of that comes in visual stuff, like the hot dog when he chokes to death and he's doing the CPR and the hot dog's like flying out of his mouth and like that kind of stuff. And then to immediately cut into the next scene of he's dead. That stuff that on paper is good. It's a fun bit, but when you visualize it, it's where it goes that extra mile. So I don't think the writing is where the film succeeds. It's in how they visualize what is written on paper, but there are still jokes that are written that have to be conceived in some way, shape, or form on paper that I think you have to give credit for. But I agree, like it's not a masterpiece in writing, nor does it think it is, nor does it want to be, nor is it trying to be.
Right.
And that's why I think it's okay. But it is also like if we're looking just at a screenplay, like is this going to win any prizes? No. But if you visualize it, it could kind of win something. But you know, I don't think this is an award-worthy screenplay by any means, but I think the characters are relatable enough, at least, like especially for loser culture, for losers. It's like, yeah, this is every loser's wet dream, creating a multi-million-dollar business idea, creating a new sport, becoming famous, an athlete, getting girls, and you know, like I think that's kind of like, you know, it taps into something relatable, but again, it's not perfect writing, but the characters are at least well thought out.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, just that you're talking about, you know, a loser's dream. It's just like the idea that I could be good at a sport, but I don't. But I don't have to run or
You're not
or do any of the athlete stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. No, I'm with you on that. The Zuckers, I think. Really, everything I've ever seen with Zuckers, and I could be a little bit wrong on this, but everything I've ever seen with them feels very vaudeville, like you could see it on a stage, you know, and it would be just as funny, or in a silent film, and it would be just as funny without any dialogue. So, which I mean, I guess Airplane, a lot of that is wordplay. A lot of it that they do is wordplay, but still, like, there's a lot of vaudevillian. There's a lot of vaudeville in their in their work. So I agree. For writing, I give it a 6.3.
Okay. I'm not copying you this time. I'm slightly lower, but I am around that range. I'm a 5.9 because it's like not quite, you know, it's above average because I enjoyed a lot of the quips and gags, but especially you did kind of put it in comparison with Airplane too. Like there are a lot of great visual gags in Airplane, but you're right. There's also such great wordplay, which I feel like this one doesn't necessarily have. It has in the commentator sections though. I think the commentator bits, that is all wordplay, and I think that works really well. Like those moments.
I think works too, and that's kind of where I gave it a bump up. But also, like, part of me goes, all right, you got two very, very funny writers as the actors, and they're doing a lot of this. How much of the distraction bits were just
ad-libbed.
improv? Ad-lib stuff. So I don't know. I don't have any information on that, but it feels like, why wouldn't you let them ad-lib a little bit?
Right. And you know, we've gone on to see them write other, because they're not credited writers on this, but we've seen them write better and great stuff. So like we know they are funny. So I think that's another thing too, is like, are we giving all the credit to the screenplay for inventing? I mean, like half of the Will Ferrell movies out there that exist, half of those scripts have nothing in those movies in the scripts. Like a lot of Step Brothers is not on the page, you know? So I do think that's a good example. And I think a lot of the dated stuff in this movie comes from the screenplay. So I think that is also something to dock it for.
Hold on just a second.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Recording with a 5-year-old in the house.
Oh, you're good. You're
no mom.
Okay. That's my maturity level too. So you're double dutying today.
All right. So let's talk about the acting. The two leads are two basically non-actors who, I mean, they're actors. They do voice acting, especially in their stuff, but they are more creative people than performance people, I would say. And I think the power of the acting in this movie comes from a lot of the supporting people and from the real life people playing versions of himself, the Robert Stack and the commentators and stuff like that. So how do you where do you land on the acting?
Yeah, it's so tough because I'm like judging it off of like camp movies, like the performances are exactly what they need to be for this film, but like judging it based on like just the craft of acting and the like well thought out dramatic arcs and all, like it doesn't have that, but I don't think it needs to. But I do think these guys play the roles they're playing effectively enough. Like they are playing two kind of losers who have this great idea, become these underdog types. But yeah, I agree with you. I think some of the best stuff performance wise, the best deliveries of the jokes are done by a lot of the supporting people who are just playing fictionalized versions of themselves. But I almost wonder if do those jokes work because they wrote really funny jokes for those guys to say, or are they actually bringing that comedy to it? I think it's a little bit of both, but I'm not 100% sold that it's all the actors doing and bringing those jokes to life. But I think they did do a good enough job. I think in terms of the women in this movie, I think the women are a little underserved in general, and the performances are a little one note because the characters are one note. But again, it's like, is it because of the women performances or the women characters? Because at the time, just women weren't getting that kind of grand spotlight, especially in these sports comedies. So I don't know. The acting, it doesn't really miss for me, but it's not like I don't go to BASEketball as like the movie that I want to watch if I want to study the craft. You know what I mean? Whereas I think the other film we're going to talk about, there are actors I could legitimately sit down and watch them speak and study what they're doing. Whereas here it's like, no, they pick the right actors for those roles, but they're not elevating the material in the way that like other actors might have. But I don't think this movie requires that. So I'm a little conflicted, honestly, to give it any sort of numerical score, but I want to hear what you have to say because it might help shape my thoughts.
Well, it's interesting what you say about the women and their roles being underserved, which I agree with. There's definitely a more sexist angle here, and they're there for specific reasons. It doesn't serve their characters very well. I will say that the actresses, especially the two main actresses, Jenny McCarthy but just not a good actress. Like I've never seen her in anything that.
I thought you were going to come here and defend her, and I was like, oh
no, I've never seen her do any. I said I've never seen anything as good. I've seen her in good things. I've never seen her be good in anything.
Right. Her worst acting job is the one where she's not even acting on The Masked Singer when she goes, "I know that voice. I knew that. I knew it was them." And I'm like, "No, you didn't. Stop fooling."
I basically don't watch The Masked Singer anymore because I cannot stand listening to her. I have said since season 1, if I could get a cut of this show that could just cut her out completely.
Oh man,
this would be a perfect show. Yeah, I can't.
Okay.
Yeah, Yasmin Bleeth, on the other hand, is I wouldn't say she's a bad actress. She's more of like she comes from Baywatch. She comes from like the modeling world. So like a lot of. This is actually probably her most nuanced role. So she's actually doing a fine job in it. I think she's doing quite well. It's actually a bit against type, the character that she's playing, because you would expect, and in other movies, she's played more of what Jenny McCarthy was playing in that movie. So it's I don't know. So I think with the women, we got both sides of this. With everybody else, it's Trey and Matt are fine. They're basically playing themselves. Squeak is great. I think he's a really great character. There's not I forget the actor's name, but the guy who the bad guy, like the villain guy in this movie, he's doing a really good job, and I think that he delivers a lot of really good comedy. And a lot of it is in his delivery too, like just like the way he uses innuendo that aren't innuendo. They're actually very literal, but he says them like innuendo. So it's like, you should come over and lay some carpet. And then she's actually, is laying carpet.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Those bits are so good. Yeah. Yeah. See, like, you bring in these moments back. I'm like, yeah, no, it worked. This movie worked.
Yeah. So I think that he is great. I think, I'll just say I'm giving it a 6.0 because I think the acting does elevate the film, but it's not, there's nothing to write home about in it. Okay. Like it's fine. I think that most of the best parts in terms of acting are people who are playing just basically themselves, Robert Stack and the commentators. So it's okay. So yeah. So what's your rating on it?
Well, I gave the writing a 5.9, and I think out of respect for David Zucker, I think the writing brought out some of the best performance moments. So I'm gonna give the performances like a 5.5. I think it's still above average. If 5 is our average, I think it's most of it's above average, but there are some that are weak links, and I do think the writing and the humor elevates some of the performances. So I'm gonna go 5.5, solid. keep it at that.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the overall quality of this film. How where talk to me about this film as a whole. Like how this is your first time, and I know we've already kind of talked about this film as a whole with you, but like
Right.
if you're looking at this film as a whole, kind of give me your thoughts on it.
Yeah, like kind of taking the camp out of it, or just as a whole with the camp.
I mean,
involved.
camp is part of the film, so
Right.
it's like just
because
really
I wouldn't say it's like a masterpiece film, yeah, but I do think it works very well for what it is trying to do. As I said, there are dated elements, but that is true for Kingpin, that is true for Waterboy, that is true for Slapshot. So like in this slate, I'm not going to say that being dated is a problem necessarily in comparison to our other film, maybe, but like I do think it really does work. When it works really well, and I think it's one that was consistently engaging. I think the first 10 minutes is what I thought the whole movie was going to be, about these guys inventing this sport, and I think the pivot was so interesting that from the get-go I was like, oh, what's next? Like I didn't realize that this was going to be what it was. I thought the joke was the game, but it's so much more, and I just think for that purpose it does kind of break convention in that sense. I do like the performances, even if they're not quality. They're still like I still have fun watching all these people in these roles. I think there's great deliveries, great bits. I think the thing is, like, I'm trying to separate it from Airplane because that is just a masterclass of comedy, but it is from the same vein, to where I think it makes me like it and appreciate it a lot more, because I can appreciate that there is genuine comedic, genius behind it. It's not like the studio thing where they're just like, we need someone to direct this movie, this script we got. Who wants to direct it? It feels like there's an actual voice in the film from David, right? David Zucker.
David.
Okay, from David Zucker. It feels like his voice is actually coming through. Like he's not an auteur, but there is like that sensibility that you get with Airplane that you get in this. It is Airplane light in that sense. It does not compare, but I do think it does. The strengths of Airplane are the strengths in this film, and I think as someone who loved that film and didn't realize till mere minutes before watching this that it was the same guy, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, this is a treat, because I haven't admittedly watched all the Naked Gun sequels that he did and all that stuff. So I really thought this was a treat. I don't think it's going to be, the top 10 movies I watched for the first time this year.
Right.
But it is one of my favorite first watches of this month. And I think that's something to say, and it's a movie that I think I will go back to. I think there's enough in it that I genuinely enjoy it.
Excellent. Well, nice. I agree with most of your stuff, except that I've watched it many, many times. And, the fact that this surprised me with how much it held up, like I said, like when I told you I think you're going to hate this, is because I was remembering all of the things that used to make me laugh when I was a teenager that wouldn't make me laugh. I thought wouldn't make me laugh anymore. And some of those things didn't, but a lot of it did. And so I think that it worked a lot better than I thought it was going to, than I thought it was going to, and it worked a lot better than I thought it was going to work for you. So my overall is I've got it at a 6. It's above average for me. 6.0.
That's exactly where I have it. Yeah. Nice. So we copied each other in two places, I think. Right? Almost.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I will say two more things about it. One that's a more personal thing, which I'll get to in a sec. But the second one, I think also looking at Stone and Parker, their other works, I think you could look at this as lesser in comparison, but I also think it's a refreshing kind of change of pace from South Park and Book of Mormon, because it is a little bit slept on nowadays, because I don't think people talk about it as much nowadays unless you have that nostalgia for it. So where, as someone who is a big fan of theirs, this was just kind of a fun other chapter. Also getting to see them act was fun. So like, I think there's also that charm of being a fan of theirs, where I could see you not liking it as much because you're a fan of theirs and it doesn't hold up to their other works, or I could see you being a fan of this because you love them and because you like seeing this other shade, which is where I fall on the side of things. And the second thing, my sound designer for Band on the Run film I'm going to be in next year, he has a tattoo, the Lazy Boy tattoo, based on this movie. Nice. So I saw he logged it 5 stars on Letterboxd, and I read his review, and it's because he has that tattoo. It's a sentimental thing, but I was like, that's awesome. I didn't actually see the tattoo with my own eyes, but he says he has a Lazy Boy tattoo because of this movie. So that's a really fun little personal connection there. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So where does that put your total? Do you have a total? My total, or my combined total for my average total for all of these scores is 6.7.
My average is a 6.475.
All right. That gives us a combined total of 6.5. We'll round it to 9. 6.59.
Okay.
All right, which takes us to our number one film, which is Speed Racer. All right, so I am so excited that you love this movie,
Mhm.
because again, I said before, like I love it, and it was not well received. It has gotten a bit of a bit of a reprieve, a bit of a redemption on the internet in the years since, but even
Mhm.
then, it was there was a brief conversation, and people still don't talk about it very much.
Yeah.
A funny thing is, it's actually a little sad thing.
Mm.
A disgraced former or the disgraced creator of Screen Junkies uh, once was tweeting about how much he loved this movie and he was having a conversation with the disgraced creator of Ain't It Cool News. And then when the Screen Junkies guy got caught and canceled for like a year, his last tweet was about how great this movie was, and it pissed me off.
Oh no.
That it was
Oh,
like anybody, if articles came out and anybody went to his Twitter, it was going to show Speed Racer, and I was like,
yeah.
no, this movie deserves better than that.
Well, hey, if it makes really terrible people catch on to the fact that this is good, then that's okay. Because I think there's also a lot of bigots that don't like the Wachowskis' work because of the obvious of who the Wachowskis are as well. And I think that's one thing I also appreciate about this as well and I think that's might be why this doesn't have as much of a conversation about it, is because they kind of wane from popularity at times. They don't do a lot of interviews for their movies when they are on like the press junkets and stuff. They just aren't as comfortable on camera themselves. And I think, especially post transition, they just haven't been out and about in the public eye as much, and they don't make movies as often. So, like, I think it's one of those things where you just don't always see them at the topic of front and center of the conversation in a way that like a Spielberg is, or a lot of these new like still populist directors. You know, it reminds me of someone like James Cameron, where he'll be in hiding for 9 years. And I think that's the thing, is like it's harder to reappraise some of their films when they are not as prominent in pop culture as they are. But I would argue, as I was saying in the last when we discussed it briefly, like their movies are some of the most influential of all time, good or bad. I mean, Bound kind of is the template for like these erotic, homoerotic, thrillers, and I do think The Matrix obviously influential for what it did for cinema, and I think Speed Racer as well, at least stylistically. Like I do think they have such influence to where I haven't even seen Cloud Atlas or Jupiter Ascending yet, but I think those also have a hand in potentially painting what the future of cinema could be. So it's very interesting that I think because they are less, you know, up in front in terms of all the public eye, I think it allows some of their lesser films to suffer a bit. But it's shocking because this is the first thing they make post Matrix trilogy, and it still just didn't catch on. And again, it's summer 2008. It's a stacked year, but it's like
Right.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, I haven't seen Jupiter Ascending or Cloud Atlas either, and mostly because of their reception. But maybe I
Right.
should. Maybe that was a bad idea because I
I
love
just
this
think
movie and it got
people
really
aren't
bad.
ready for it, I guess. And I think
Yeah.
maybe they're trying to push technology forward in a way that, now that we've kind of established some tropes, maybe people will go back and realize kind of like what we're doing right now with this one. I don't know. I
Yeah.
really don't know what it is. And it's not the marketing, because this movie I remember was marketed very well. Like they marketed the hell out of this movie for both kids and adults. They really marketed it as like a 4-quadrant film, to where I don't even think that's the luxury Jupiter Ascending or Cloud Atlas have. This does. It was from the people that made the Matrix trilogy, and like a trilogy that was pretty well received, not as much as sequels, but it was still a pop culture moment, and people should have been excited for what was coming next. I genuinely don't know why people, aside from a very crowded marketplace, didn't show up for this one. And maybe it's just because they
Right.
got bad reviews. I was 10 when this came out, so I don't necessarily know what the reviews were like at the time, but yeah, it's a bummer.
The reviews were not good. I remember when it
Mm.
came out, and I was just like, God, and then I worked at the video store, and I had, it's always that weird thing where I'm like, I'm singing the praises of this movie I know people aren't going to enjoy,
Yeah.
and it always kind of sucks. But yeah, it was marketed to basically, the 4 quad to everyone, and it's rated PG and has a lot of really cool action. I was watching it this morning, rewatching it this morning, and before my kids got up, when they got up, they came down and they were just sitting and they like got invested in it with all the cool action and colors and stuff like that. So that was
Chimpanzee.
really neat. Yeah, chimpanzee. But yeah, so there's a lot to love. I absolutely love this movie, and I'm so glad you do. And hopefully, this is the first step in everyone realizing how great this movie is. I got this light that's coming in. It's
okay.
All over my face. All right. Oh God. Okay, but let's talk about the camp in it. And there's just a lot of it. I mean, this movie truly embraces the camp aspect of sports, of racing, and of cartoons, and of basically it captures it all just so well, puts a nice little bow on it. And I would like to hear your experience with the camp, or how you felt while watching this.
Because you said there's so much of it, and there is, but I think it's a different kind of camp. Like, it's not the like stupid, silly, like schlocky camp. It's just more so excess. It's the color, it's the extravagance, it's the boldness, it's the queerness at times, just in its theming and all that. Just like the individual underdog story, like all that is very heightened. But I didn't always look at it as a camp sense, because I think it is adapting a cartoon to where, like, I think a lot of those are given by adaptation, and that it isn't like leaning into being schlocky or stupid or silly or dumb. I don't even find it that silly. I think there's a lot going on, and it's very plentiful with excessive stuff, but I don't necessarily know if it's like fully, as big and stupid and corny and silly as like I think about when I think of camp. But I also know camp takes on so many different iterations, and you could look at just like the Wachowskis in general as camp filmmakers, just in the types of movies they make and the queer symbolisms and all that stuff. But yeah, it was harder to lean into it as a camp movie, more so than just like a very bright, bold, colorful adaptation of a cartoon anime come to live action. And I think that's where, but you're right, it is camp still. It's just a different kind of camp. And I think that's where I'm not necessarily associating it as much in my head as a camp film, because it doesn't even feel like one of those films that could be like so bad it's good, because I don't even see the bad. I don't see the schlock. I don't see maybe a few little editing or like visual things with the CGI at times, but even that, it adds to the charm. But I guess that is the camp as well.
Right.
Sure.
Well, and when we talk about camp, there is as you said, there are many different types of camp.
Right.
And the camp in this movie, it's not the same as the other ones, especially the dumber ones, because it's not that. It does take on the camp roles of excess, because that's really where it is. Like, everything is just
extreme,
so much higher than, like, just over the top.
It's like it's a sour lollipop, like where you suck and you're like, whoa, your head almost explodes.
It's everything is just absolutely over the top. Theatrical, because that's also an element of camp. The actors in it are all this very theatrical acting and a very over the top acting, and that's really part of it as well. There's I don't know, there's just basically, it's camp top to bottom. It's just a different type of camp. Like that's the thing. Even the transitions, the having like the heads go by as it transitioned into it,
with the sweeping effects.
All that.
I
That's
love that.
Very over the top and campy.
Fucking love it.
Yeah. So for me, this is, and I get what you're saying. Like, I get what you're saying, that the type of camp is different. So maybe you're not paying attention to it the whole time. To me, this is the campiest of the whole lot, like the whole slate. It's so just dripping with that camp, but again, a different type of camp.
Yeah, and I think you've sold me, because originally I was thinking of it more of like the schlock camp, not looking at it as like the hammy camp. And it's like hard. Like, there's so many different types of camp, like you said. But I agree. Like, if you're thinking of just fun, excess, bold, beautiful, colorful, like hammy, big performances, everything's big and broad, then this is, I agree, as camp as it gets. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna go 7.5 on the camp for sure.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Solid.
People might call me crazy on this, because I have it at a 9.0.
Okay, yeah.
But hey, we're still both very high. So I'm into that. I need to write this down.
Yeah, let me write it down as well, just for myself.
You said 7.5?
Yeah. 7.6. Let's go 7.6. Let's tag it a little bit closer to the 8.0 range, but still being above the 7.5.
Right on. All right. let's talk about the writing. The writing, it's hard to say on this because a lot of it is adapted. So there's not a lot of
Originality.
new ideas necessarily
Mhm.
happening here. And a lot of it is visual. And even the dialogue and stuff like that is intentionally exaggerated. So it doesn't feel like really great writing, but it's also not bad at all. Like it's still really good. And structurally as it, because the structure is also part of the screenplay. It's not just
Yeah.
the words that they say, but the
Mhm.
structure of the film. Structurally, I also very, very much enjoy the writing on this. But again, I think for me, it is a lower element than everything else in terms of the focus for me. But I still think it's very good. How do you feel about the writing?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think because it's an adaptation, like you said, a lot of the general crux of it is already done. Like a lot of the work is done for them. But also, you got to think like I didn't watch the cartoons, so I don't know how long they were, how plentiful they were, how basic or simple they were. Because it is a very simple story, but you still have to make it a full length feature film, and I think they actually do a good job in doing so and bringing a lot of great arcs to these characters. I think the speeches that the parents give, each of them gets a really like great speech. I think those are the parts where the dialogue is not exaggerated, and because it is so rooted in honesty, it is striking because we obviously know just from hearing interviews with the Wachowskis for the new Matrix film, like their parents, they had a great bond with their parents. There was a real great love of family there, and I think all their films tap into some sort of family and love and togetherness that was lost when I think both their parents died before the final Matrix movie came out recently, and I think that was something they really touched upon. And I think you get it in this. There's so much sincerity, not just in the visualness, not in visualness, is that a word? But not just in the aesthetics, not just in the sincerity of the sports story, the hoorah of it all, but just these characters. You feel like they are people you can still connect with, even if they are a little bit heightened in their dialogue. You still feel like, oh, that is my brother, that is my sister, that is my mom, that is my dad. Like it fits the familiarity while still having that heightened sense of fantastical nature to it that I think makes it a really interesting balance. And it's not the Matrix. They're not creating a whole world from scratch. This is the Matrix is a 10. But I think if you look at this just on its own terms as an adaptation, I think this is as good an adaptation in script and storytelling as you could get when trying to adapt something that is probably inherently very bare bones, very simple, straightforward, it can be straightforward, and it is, but it's filled in very deliciously with all the little nuances, which I think come from the script.
Right. No, I completely agree. And you're talking about the speeches that the parents give are obviously really great. Also, Speed's little speeches every once in a while, like that, where he's talking about his dad and racing and his brother and all of that. It's all good. And I'll touch more on that in a minute when we get to acting,
Yeah.
but it's good. For me, the writing gets a 7.0.
Okay. It's funny because this is where I actually went a little higher. I went 8.0 for the writing. I think the writing is just a solid 8. Again, it has it's not a Matrix, but for what it is, it is a great evolution.
No, I mean, that's good. It's a good score. I'm into it. Let's get into the acting, because the acting, this movie for me, is made, makes the acting makes or breaks it. Like, you have to have people who are willing to do what is needed in this movie, and who understand their role in this. Christina Ricci, probably more than anyone, understands what Trixie is supposed to be and who she's supposed to be. She's so good, dynamic on screen. Everything that she does in this movie is so good. Everyone, though, it's not just her. Everyone is basically firing on all cylinders, in my opinion. Like they are delivering the camp. That is the big part of it, is that, and everyone but Speed and Racer X get to be the straight characters, and they get to have the moody, dramatic stuff, and they get to be very melodramatic,
which you need because this movie is an 11 out of 10 consistently. You need that kind of balancing kind of equalizer, otherwise it is too much. Yeah, if you have someone who's bigger in that role, it's like it might be a little exhausting, and it is exhausting, but in a good way. But it might get exhausting in a bad way if you have too much
Right.
at the front and center. You need that anchor to ground it.
100%. And that's why I think that everyone is just doing so well. To me, Matthew Fox has never been a great actor. I'm a big fan of Lost, but I think that most people who play those type of roles that he plays in Lost are generally picked because they are pretty like average, and they can be that type of character. I think he does a fine job. But Emile Hirsch, I'm a big fan of Emile Hirsch. I have been for a very long time, and that was actually one of the selling points for this movie, also because I really love Emile Hirsch. I think he's incredible as as Speed. I think that John Goodman, in every scene he's in, is just funny and very, very good, and delivers. The kid brother is so funny in this movie. Every actor, Susan Sarandon, she also delivers perfectly. I feel like everybody in this movie delivers damn near perfectly, and so it's just the acting is very, very good.
I agree.
What did you score it on acting?
Yeah, I mean, you said everything I would have said, but one other thing though, chimpanzee acting, pretty solid. I don't know how much of it is CGI or not, but if it is a real monkey, monkey's also acting very well. I just keep getting higher and higher with these scores. I think because he is very straight man and he's front and center, I'm not as high on the Emile Hirsch performance just because it is as expected. But I think all the supporting characters around him just elevate everything so much to where he does work so well in the ensemble. One other thing I wanted to bring up, I'll tell you right now, I gave it an 8.4 in performances. So I'm going even higher. I'm working my way up the ladder, 0.4 at a time. If you can see right here, 7.6, 8.0, 8.4. But I do think one thing that's also notable, John Goodman was suffering from severe alcoholism at the time, and I've heard that cast was a family for John and made him kind of sober up and gave him that safe space and kind of became that rehabilitation for him. This cast grew super, super close. And I think that's something to be said. And I think it goes back hand in hand with what I was saying about the Wachowskis kind of not loving being in the public eye, because I don't think they do it for that. I think they do it for the art and for the community of people they build on the set. It's why Keanu and Carrie-Anne Moss came back to The Matrix all those years later, not because of the money, not because they wanted to for their own personal gain, but because they loved working with the Wachowskis. And I think the same is true here. They created such a core, fundamental, and safe space for everyone that they were able to be themselves, allow each other to absorb their love. And I think that's true with the Wachowskis, and why right shortly after this, we see them both begin their transitions to fully accepting who they are. And I think a lot of that is built on the ensembles and the creative working space they put on a film set, and the way they're able to kind of break away from the studio and say, this is what we're doing, and we're going to make it together as a team, and everyone is 100% in. There's no one who's phoning it in, no one who doesn't want to be there. And I think it shows in the performances, not just on their own, but within one another. So I also wanted to bring that up because the ensemble, I think, just works together so well. So 8.4 for me.
I agree. I think the ensemble's great. When I talk about Emile Hirsch, I'm talking about his acting in general, like his slate of movies. If you haven't seen a lot of Emile Hirsch stuff,
and that's me, I haven't seen a lot of his stuff.
There's some movies I can recommend because I think he's an incredible actor that doesn't get enough work. But in this movie, he's a straight man, so he's not going to be completely noticeable
but he's not the weak link either, because I don't.
He's not a weak link. Yeah. No, he works within this. Within this ensemble, playing his part perfectly. So yes, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, everyone else is just a strong link too.
I actually am very, very close to you in this, and I gave the acting an 8.5. So
there you go.
We're very, very close. Okay, so let's talk about overall quality, as if our gushing about this movie hasn't given us that. But is there anything left to be said for you about the quality of this film?
No, I mean, I think we haven't really talked a lot about the sports themselves, but I think it's because it's a very basic template. They give you a clear motivation, a clear obstacle, and a clear resolution, to where I think a lot of it is not just, it's not your traditional underdog story of, this underdog trying to prove others wrong. It's trying to prove those who believe in him right. And I love that about this film. It's him showing everyone that believed in him that they were right to believe in him, and give him that satisfaction rather than trying to beat the odds. Because from the get-go, it's very clear that the odds are stacked against him because they're manipulated to be stacked against him. And I think there's all
Right.
that stuff about corporate, interference that we haven't even talked about yet, which is the capitalist angle of it too, which
Yeah.
all of the Wachowskis films from The Matrix and beyond have covered, especially the new Matrix, the way it quite literally puts yourself inside the Warner Brothers office. And I think that's what's so great about all their films is just their ability to show that kind of defiance against the system, against the man, against the big boss. And if it was at Disney, against the mouse, but it's not. It's its own beautiful thing. So yeah, I think it's great. We've talked about the visuals and why it's so revolutionary there. We don't get Scott Pilgrim or Spider-Verse without it. I will stand by that. I genuinely don't think so. I think we see a lot of the great technical marvels of today because of what the Wachowskis did with The Matrix and Speed Racer. But because of the digital nature of it, even more so Speed Racer than The Matrix, I think, in terms of visually. Personally, it's a hot take, but I think so.
I don't know. I'm not sure it's a hot take. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're completely right. In fact, everything you said was absolutely spot on. I think that this it's a shame that its quality has not been recognized by most people, and that's the big thing I want to talk about. That big takeaway for me here is that, like, if you're watching this and you've never seen Speed Racer, go watch Speed Racer. It's really like and don't watch it thinking you're going to watch, Ford v Ferrari or something, or a racing movie like that, because you're never going to get that.
Yeah.
You're not even going to get the Matrix in this movie. You're going to get a very stylized, just camp fest of a film that is very good. Like, it's very entertaining and very well made.
And and it goes back to, like, not just intention of the filmmaker, but also expectation of the audience. Like, if you go into it expecting, and I think that might be why people don't love it, is because they're expecting that greatness. Because now people like us have heralded it for its greatness, but we're heralding it for other types of greatnesses than other movies possess. And I think that's the thing. And that's why, I mean, we talked about it on my show, on Frame Wreck, on my channel, like our show Frame Wreck. It's like Cat in the Hat, one of my favorite movies of my childhood, because I didn't have that expectation set on it that it was this horrible movie. For me, it was that escapism to a Seussified, colorful land that I had never seen before. It was my escapism, and I feel like that's what this could be for people. We're obviously a little older watching it, but I think if my kids someday, when I have kids, hopefully, see this movie, I think that could be a great source of escapism in a similar way. And I think the problem is a lot of people just, like, took the word of mouth and ran with it, of like, oh, this is not a good movie, and didn't judge it on its own terms, which is kind of the whole crux of what your whole camp film thing is like looking at the films on their own merits rather than trying to compare them to movies that they're not, or they're not trying to be.
Right, exactly. I struggled with the quality thing because I kept wanting to, as far as the score on that, because I kept wanting to give it higher and then feeling embarrassed by how high I was giving it, and then realizing that no, that I need to give it exactly what it deserves. But I think that all comes back to just kind of my history with this movie and how I loved it more than anyone else. I finally settled on an 8.5 of overall quality.
Matt, you stole my document this time. That's where I have it. Because I also looked at it as, like, when I looked at my Wachowskis behind the curtain letterbox list, I had The Matrix at a 9 and Matrix, the newest Matrix, at an 8. And I think this is better than the new Matrix, but not as good as the original. So I put this at an 8.5 right between. That's how I came up with that score. So 8.5 is where I'm at as well.
Excellent. All right. So, well, that puts it at an 8.25 for me. What is your total score?
I have 8.125.
Gives us an 8.18, which is more than 6.7. So
way more. Yeah.
Congratulations to Speed Racer. You have won the Camp Trophy for the sports badge. And congratulations to all of you. Yeah, exactly. Congratulations to all of you, because you have now earned the Sports Merit Badge. Ah, yay! Good for you.
Is that made by a lazy boy?
I should have put a lazy boy on there. Dylan, tell everybody where they can find you.
Oh yeah, you can find me at the Dill Pickle Movie Network. We've referenced our show Framerec a few times in Draft Day. We did a draft for Matt's birthday over there, so check out those shows specifically if you want to see more of Matt and I together. He is the heart and soul of all the shows we do together. So I'm just the guy who keeps the conversation moving, but he is so gracious in all his time that he adds to those shows over there, and now to see him kind of, and I've talked to him about this off air, but I want to say it to the public and the world too, to seeing what he's done here and just bringing his love of film even to a broader sense here and finding his own format and his own kind of rhythm and groove. It's really amazing just to see, Matt, your growth, just and seeing, hopefully it'll continue even beyond here, because what you have to say about film is always so enticing and exciting for me to listen to and for me to just think about film in a certain way, and especially when it comes to camp movies and movies that are like kind of considered bad or have different reputations than what they should be at least judged on, and I think that's kind of what the show is hopefully going to do for at least Speed Racer, most importantly, but a lot of these films is just kind of reevaluating them with a certain context that might not have been given when they were marketed or when they first came out, or when critics unfairly looked at them in a different brow, expecting them to be the next Scorsese films. Some movies can be theme park rides, and some movies are amazing theme park rides, as a Speed Racer, which is one of my new favorite Wachowski films now. So you can find me at the Dill. Sorry, back to the plugs. I find me at the Dill Pickle Movie Network, the Dill Pickle Podcast. We do a Marvel show there. We do a Oscar show there. We do Recipe for Reality, which is all about reality TV. Traders starts in January, so we're going to be on that soon. Matt will probably guest a few times there because I know he's a big Traders fan. But the greatest gift of all is the community I'm surrounded with, including this guy here. So I'm very honored to be on this show and get my badge. I'm excited. I'm gonna print one out and stick it on my lapel, because this was just so fun. And just getting to watch 4 movies that I'd never seen before, and one piece of garbage that I got to explain and fully eloquate why I don't like it. And wear the Celtics hat that I haven't worn since 8th grade. It was great. So thank you, Matt, for this opportunity, and for being a good pal.
Well, thank you. That all of that is very, very kind. Unfortunately, I wasn't listening to any of it. So, can you do it all again? I'm kidding.
No, okay. I thought my mic cut out or something. Like,
no.
So Matt and I,
that would have been funny. You're on mute. No.
Oh my god, that would have been the best. You just would have like, Dylan, you're muted.
I should have. I ruined that joke. Yeah. Recipe for Reality. I really would love to be on there, because that is the one. That is the last Infinity Stone of the Dill Pickle Movie Network Infinity Stones that I have not collected yet, because I've guested on all the other shows.
And a happy Thanksgiving as well, because I know this is coming out on Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday, so to be asked to be on this show was already like, I was stoked, and then to hear that I was getting to talk on an episode about sports on Thanksgiving, I was like, this is Matt's making my dreams come true. So thank you that, and thank you for that, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Enjoy it, celebrate, tell everyone why you're thankful.
Well, I'm thankful for Dylan, because he one day years ago now, he was starting his channel, and I was like, hey, if you ever want me to come on to do a couple episodes on bad movies, I would be happy to. And a few months later, he messaged me. He's like, hey, so would you be willing to do a monthly show about bad movies? And I'm like, yes, that's awesome.
I love to gamble. I love to gamble.
Episodes, but no, I'm this started out as just like a couple guys talking about movies, turned into a show of a couple guys talking about movies, which has turned into a couple bros talking about movies. I mean, you become a very good friend of mine, which is one of my best friends. It's weird. It's weird how the internet works, because like I've never
find the worst people you've ever met and the best people you've ever met.
Right. I've never seen this man physically.
No,
but
he doesn't even know.
Feels like a real brother to me. So, but yeah, we can suck each other off later about how much
Matt, you're muted. Repeat that. What did you say? Not that last part. The sentimental shit before it.
I said we can suck each other off.
Oh my God.
No, this has been so much fun. You can find me here at Matty Loves Movies. Like this video if you liked it. Give us a comment. Tell us which one of these you love. Have you seen Speed Racer? Did you love Speed Racer? If you didn't, you have to tell us why.
Why the fuck not?
Yeah, why not? Tell us what it is that doesn't work for you. You can also find me on pretty much anywhere on the internet at MattmanXIII. You can find me on Letterboxd. I sometimes write reviews, although I generally specialize in very short reviews that are succinct. Not like how long I talk on something like this. It's very interesting that my written reviews are so short, considering how long I talk all the time. Yeah, so you can find us here. There will be another episode of Camp Film Camp next month in December, which is our holiday special, and we are doing something interesting. We're changing up the format because you know what they say. On your third episode, you should always change the format just for one episode, just a little bit. That's the right way to do things.
Always got to be episode 3, though. Before the groove is got, you got to go.
And the format's going to be. It's not that the format's going to be changed. Like we're going to be in the same format, but I am going to have. I'm going to have 4 guests on, so there's going to be 5 of us, and we each got to pick our own movie for us to cover, and then we're going to cover it like a normal episode, just probably longer because there's going to be a lot of people talking. And those movies are, so you can watch them for next time. Those movies are Black Christmas from 2006. There are 3 different Black Christmas movies. There's the original, there's the 2006 one, and there's 2019 one. This is the 2006.
Titled Black Christmas. There are a lot of Black Christmas movies, but...
Oh, yeah. No, titled Black. There's the original Black Christmas and then 2 remakes. This is the first remake. Black Christmas 2006. The Christmas Chronicles 2. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Meet Me in St. Louis. And Nativity, which you may have to watch on YouTube because I think that might be the only way to watch it. But those are going to be the 5 movies we're going to cover. I'm not going to tell you who is going to be on this episode because that's going to be a reveal for the episode, but he might be closer than you think.
Santa himself will be on the episode. He's watching you when you sleep. He watches you when you're awake, and he's with us right now.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you who all's going to be on there, but 2 of the people on this screen are going to be on there. And I'm not going to tell you which 2. Yeah, but 2 of the people that are on screen right now are going to be on that episode.
It's not Mark Teixeira, I'll tell you that.
It's not, because I don't know Mark, whichever name you just said.
Teixeira.
But no, yeah. So you can join us back on that. Next Thursday, we're gonna have an actually really special episode of Cinema Soapbox, which is gonna be 2 episodes. You're gonna have to tune in to see why it's 2 episodes and why it's so special. But 2 episodes, Cinema Soapbox, next Thursday, which is, of course, the 5th, Thursday the 5th. Thursday, December 5th. We have 2 episodes of Cinema Soapbox. At the end of December, there's going to be an episode of Camp Film Camp. And then whatever videos I release between then. But yeah, so Dylan, you have any last words before we get off here?
Oh, just a happy Thanksgiving, and thank you, Matt. And if you want me to do the whole spiel again, we can wait until off air. They don't want to hear me sing your praises once again because I could go on another 20 minutes. But thank you guys so much for watching this too, because Thanksgiving, it's a fun time to share what you're thankful for, and I'm thankful for movies and this guy. So thank you.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you had a great day on Camp Film Camp.